Now it's time for today's perspective. And first, let's bring you the latest news on the war in Ukraine. Russian forces have widened the front line in Ukraine's northern region of Sumy as it continues its slow advance, capturing another village on Tuesday. The advance bringing the region's capital closer to within the range of frontline drones. The advance, as well as Kyiv, has showed its ability to continue fighting by conducting a series of strikes in recent days, hitting Russian strategic bombers and the Crimea Bridge. Well, amid the war, NGOs and charitable organisations trying to work to ensure that human rights are upheld by both sides. But can you do that amid an ongoing war? Well, Veronika Velch has just been appointed in the last month or so as new director of Amnesty International in Ukraine, and she joins us now from Kyiv. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme. It's a new role for you, isn't it? You've been in the job, as I say, for just over a month now. What do you see as Amnesty's role, if you like, in Ukraine?
Hello, Stuart. It's great to see you, and it's a pleasure to be here. I've been in this role a little bit more than that time, but definitely it's a new role. And as you know, it's very hard and it's a very unprecedented situation when authoritarian regime basically invades democratic regime. The regime with nuclear weapon is invading democratic regime with that voluntarily gave up a nuclear weapon to secure the peace in the world and stability. And of course, Ukraine is getting a lot of help and support and everything for the, this fair trade-off to remain the democratic country with a strong rule of law. But of course, it doesn't come, as a granted, as a gift to us. And we have to make sure that also, Ukrainian government and all the war procedures and, the conduct of doing the war would be met from this side as well. The same as, we are talking about the conditions for those people who live in Ukraine, and everyone should have the opportunity to live, in as democratic country as possible under the severe conditions, under the martial law and other restrictions that we have here. But no doubt that main accent and of our work would be focused on the war crimes, would be focused on all the brutalities and cruelties committed by Russia and Russian soldiers on the Ukrainian soil against Ukrainian civilians.
And is that really realistically possible while there's a war going on? I mean, are you able, for example, to have access to where you need to go to enable to document that?
As far as we could do this, we have unprecedented situation, for example, where the Russian troops would pull off and, that we could talk to the victims. We know the situation where people living occupied territories that been under occupation even for a short amount of time, and they try to rejoin their fellow citizens on other territories that are controlled by Ukrainian government. We can conduct those interviews. We can talk to the family members who have people in captivity. We can talk to the people who've been just released from as a prisoners of war, civilian detainees, and collect all of this. And it's tremendously hard, of course, and individual risk is involved here. And of course, you have to go through the special permission, and usually also Ukrainian government is trying to be helpful in many ways for us in order to complete our work. But of course, the individual's risk is always in place. And, the people who are making the choice to go to document, to talk, they under this pressure of doing so. But, it's crucially important to do this type of work, even if it looks very meaningless right now. And I know there's many skepticism around the work that human rights organization or international organization are doing here, because war is ongoing. No one's know when it's going to be end. But, eventually, there still would be justice at the end. And we strongly believe in this, because otherwise we would not be able to restore the peace in the world, peace in Europe, the stable peace, for the generations to come. And I always say that if it's going to happen and we will have this trial or wherever how it's going to look like, we have to, how we are going to show up there with a big, bucket of tears, or it's going to be, the evidence-based cases that where we could be able to keep those who committed those crimes accountable.
You're there in Kyiv. I mean, you're there in Kyiv. Presumably, it's one thing to be able to, or to try to investigate cases that you hear of from the from the Russian side. But can you do that the other way round as well? Do you come across cases where Ukrainian forces have perhaps overstepped the mark?
I would tell, for example, we try to be, impartial as much as possible. And of course, when we do our research, that the part of our work is to make sure, for example, that if we are calling Russia to follow the Geneva Convention, because as we all know, war is, as a fact, is not prohibited by the international law. People can make war. They can be aggressive to each other, and they could do this, but they have to follow certain rules. And those rules of the war, they exist for the reason, and all they are, in the Geneva Convention. And for example, recently we work on the prisoners of war condition, big research and everything. So what we did and what we try to do all the time on a regular basis is to visit the Russian prisoners camp, Russian prisoners of war camps. There is many of those, mostly in Western Ukraine, and we interview those prisoners. We try to understand the condition. We try to monitor what the condition, what kind of food people consume, if they have access to the information, if they could be. So all that's components are equally important to us, because otherwise we would not distinguish the difference. Right?
And the kind of things that you discover as you go along, do you get reactions as you go along? For example, you were talking there about visiting Ukrainian prisoners in Russian camps. I mean, if you start saying, well, why are these people not getting proper food, will you immediately get any kind of reaction from the Russians?
It would get zero reaction from Russians usually. And it's not only about Amnesty International, it's about many organizations, it's about even International Cross that experience big problems with accessing to Ukrainians prisoners of war. Almost, for example, every single family member or prisoners of war admitted that, for example, that the only one organization in the world that has a mandate, for example, to visit prisoners of war, for example, if we talk about Russia, by the official mandate, it would be International Red Cross. But from what we know, Russian side is really not cooperative in that way. And in many cases, people are not getting visited, they're not getting any information or something. So, if we have one side that completely disrespecting the international law, disrespecting the Geneva Convention, disrespecting the rule of law, we are not going to get what we have to do, but we have to monitor, we have to make a call. We have great cases, for example, when the members of Saudi Arabia was, aware of the cases of people being tortured or starving in the prison in Russia, Ukrainian prisoners I'm talking right now, and in that labor camps, on that colonies, conditions improved, and we have our prisoners of war who've been released reporting about this. So we know that individual efforts matters. We also have our activists who are trying to reach out with the information through their own embassies, ambassadors who are based in Russia, because once we're starting to get information, the condition improves overall. But in general, of course, Russian authorities completely disrespectful to the international law and any conditions.
So, I mean, from what you're saying, you do see you do see a real difference then to the way Ukraine is going about this war to the way Russia is going about this war.
Of course, that's a profound difference, and the profound difference is, I always try to explain why even, for example, rule of making the war exist. We do not want to have war at all, but when the war exists, we have Geneva Convention, and that Geneva Convention exists, that people would treat each other as humans. They would not humiliate, they would not torture. Then if the moment of ending up or grieving upon, peace or something will come, at least we will have this humane face to approach that conversation. But right now, 3.5 years, we see, the Russian side executing Ukrainian prisoners on a camera, being torturing them and everything else. So it's very hard to approach because there's so much hatred has been caused by this. And of course, Ukraine is trying to create all the conditions. And, I would not exclude that, incidents and everything happen and all that cases should be probably, investigated properly and everything. I would never say 100% that everything is always clear from both. But in general, conditions are met when we talk about Geneva Convention and the art of doing the war, or those conditions that have been established in Geneva.
Good to talk to you on the programme today. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. Veronika Velch, she's Director of Amnesty International in Ukraine, joining us from Kyiv. Thank you very much.